Yeah, sure. Well, I was first saying I think that experience is not something that you really like. Anytime you start something new, obviously you're not going to be ready for it because it's something new, and we certainly were not quote unquote ready for it when we started at 10 and 7 and we started
kind of like we're gonna do this thing.
Yeah, but I think it kind of originates from your own sort of need, and because of that you can kind of explore, well, hey, I need something, I want something, and maybe there are other people out there that also want the same thing, and then maybe I can try to create a solution for myself and what I see as a problem in the world, and then to create something that maybe makes it easier for me or makes it better for me. And so that's what we started doing, which is a kind of a different mindset than just like, it's like, let's start a business. That wasn't really the mindset we approached it with. It was more like, what is it that is our need, right? What is it that is a problem in our life? And I think that's kind of a way to approach life in a sense. The last talk we did 4 years ago was called Think Like an Entrepreneur, and it wasn't about like how to be an entrepreneur and go through the steps, but it was more like how can you actually think like a creator, think like a builder, think like a what's a problem in my life and how can I create the solution. And so that was kind of how we initially started, was we faced a problem, which is that school shut down, and we were like, okay, what do we do now, right? And a lot of people were facing that problem, and we thought, well, we need to think of how we want to learn, right? And that has to originate from how do we want to live our lives? How do we want to prepare ourselves?
Yeah, well, do you guys remember like the pandemic where, all the schools shut down and then you had to go to school from home? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we had the same problem. And then we didn't really, like it very much. So we decided to, set up our own education and basically started doing that. And then that has evolved into a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we were thinking about in terms of how you can approach education is ultimately it's a way to think about life in terms of how do I think about solving problems. And that's a lot of that's what supposedly when you go get a job, that's what you're doing, is you're solving problems, you're adding value in some way. And I think that as a young person, it can be hard to think about how do I add value, because generally when you get a job as part of some big organization and they're doing a lot of things and then you're playing some kind of role in that, but it's hard to understand your role and it's hard to know exactly how am I adding value, and it can seem disconnected and complicated. And then as a young person, you're in school and you're not necessarily prompted to think about how am I adding value and what am I doing with my life, right? And so I think that what we initially started with was how can we help young people to think about those things, to start thinking about my life in the sense of how can I start adding value to the people around me. And that should start very small. And I think that that's a lot of what we initially did was what is it that we really want to do with our education, and part of it is like initially we focused on our sibling relationship. That was something that was very important to us, is like, hey, we want to build a strong relationship for ourselves so that we can face the world together, we can tackle these problems together. And that was part of what we started doing in terms of, hey, how can siblings collaborate and improve their relationship? And so I think that that's a way in which you can think about what are the real, like, tangible, real problems in my life that I can think about solving. And I think that
well, do you guys have you guys ever had any ideas for like a small business? Maybe it's like a lemonade stand or selling like bracelets or something like that. Obviously there's this idea we haven't really heard much about like what it actually is, but like have you guys ever had, maybe you started with a problem and then you're like, maybe I can turn it into a business? Like a while back I think we had one kid who was who wanted to make some money, and so she started selling like apple cider around her neighborhood, where she attached, I think, a wagon to her bicycle, and then she made a big pot of apple cider and then went around her neighborhood and started just selling it. and she actually made a lot of money, I think. Yeah. Have you guys ever like had a small business or like a lemonade stand or something like that? Mm-hmm. You? What did you do?
We just I've made lemonade stands
Yeah.
And it's yeah.
What did you do,
I
Sumay?
think with me and like Natalie and like some other kids when we were in 2nd grade, we sold friendship bracelets.
Oh,
We
yeah.
sold one to Lauren for $2.
Hey, well, there you go. You made a sale.
You made something out of nothing, and then you made some money, right? And then did you guys split the profits? Both of you got $1.
Well, I think we like sold like 3 things. We were so happy, and then we started getting bored of it. And we were like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's something that Isla's also done a lot. Is that like
I've done a lot of businesses, and I've gotten bored many times.
Yeah, and I think that that's really good because as a young person, you don't have to like worry about supporting yourself. So you have a lot of freedom to maximize a lot of what we think about as a young person. What you really want to do is you want to maximize your learning. You want to maximize growing yourself. And so as an adult, you might think, oh, well, maybe I'm getting a little bored of this business, but I need to make money, and then you have to go do that. But I think as a young person, you want to take advantage of that freedom. So
And
so
we are young people. So
Yep. And
we've
so,
been like, like I did a dog business for a while, and then I also made. Do any of you guys like Harry Potter?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I made like I think.
The Harry Potter one.
Yeah, did I give
Yeah, you
Lexi
gave
one?
to Lexi
yeah.
for her birthday.
Does she still have it? A couple of kids broke theirs.
I think it broke.
Oh
Yeah.
no, okay. I'll have to upgrade the design with something a bit more sturdy. But then I'd make Harry Potter wands with chopsticks and then hot glue. And I think it's cool. I think it's cool.
But it was something that kind of originated from her interest where she was already like, okay, I love Harry Potter, I want a wand. But then you look on Amazon,
I
they're
look
like
on- it's so
$50 for a
expensive.
stick, which is like kind of ridiculous.
And
so
my
then,
mom's like, I'm not gonna pay for that, so I gotta make my own one.
yeah. And then she's like, oh wow, this is actually really cool, and I can literally take a chopstick and some hot glue, which is very, very minimal in terms of cost, and then sell it for even $10, $20 is a much better price comparable to like what you see on Amazon. So that was something that you did, and then at a certain point, it's like, okay, I'm done making wands. I've made enough wands. But I think that's a really good experience because you're thinking about what is it that's a real need, and how do I solve this problem? And that's something that I think people will phrase it, it's like, oh yeah, we're learning all these like life skills, but what you're really doing is you're engaging in a process of creation. You're engaging in a process of identifying problems and thinking about how do I build a solution. And ultimately, that's I think what life and bringing meaning to it and finding fulfillment is all about.
Well, you're making something out of nothing. Like when you make a craft or something, like it feels cool. Like whenever I make a craft, I go around and annoy my family and like, look at this, I'm like, hey, I made this thing, and it feels good, right? And not only is it like you make something out of nothing and like you feel good, but you can also bring that to other people. So it's kind of looking at it in a different way of like, I don't know, it can feel kind of boring if you're like, I'm gonna add to my education and start a business, versus like, hey, I'm gonna make something that's really cool, and then I'm gonna, give it to other people and maybe make some money. Maybe I can donate to charity. Maybe I can, help other people, and all of a sudden, you're helping people, you're meeting people, you're learning a lot of things.
And to think that it's also not outside of like what you might do in a traditional job role, because you think about if you get a job at a company, ultimately what they're paying you to do is to add value in some way. But I think a lot of people are trained to, okay, I should just do what I'm told, versus I think building this mindset of understanding what the problem is that you're trying to solve allows you to think just beyond like, oh, I'm going to do whatever my boss tells me, or in school you're thinking I'm going to do whatever my teacher tells me. But you're not necessarily trained to think like, well, what is it that my teacher is trying to do? And like, maybe can I even help my teacher and those sorts of things, right? You're not necessarily prompted to think that way. But ultimately, that's how you really add the most value. You have to know, how am I adding value? You have to get engaged in that process of why and what am I doing here. And I think that this is really an opportunity to do that, because it's not just, oh, Aila made some wands. It was, she's had a problem in her life, she's interested in Harry Potter, and the why that was driving her was part of her success. It wasn't like, hey, I made a wand for $10. It's like she could connect with people around an interest of Harry Potter, right? And then she has a basis of communicating with a potential customer. And that's a way in which I think if you're really driven by understanding what is it that I'm trying to do, how am I trying to add value, then you can ultimately add a lot more value, and people will see that and appreciate that a lot more. And so I think that that's more of, I think to think about it as entrepreneurship separate from other things is not necessarily the best way to think about it, but more about engaging in that process of what is the problem that I'm solving and how can I create the most value. And that's something that we learned a lot about early on when we first starting our business. We were learning from people like Paul Graham, who's a founder of Y Combinator, and which is the most successful startup incubator in the world. They take adults who are trying to start these companies and they help them out and give them advice and give them seed money and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of what he talks about is you have to think about the real problem. You have to think about what is the need here. And ideally, you're also solving a problem that you also have instead of, oh, in theory, some people out there need this. That's often not the best way to approach it because you could be wrong. But if you know that I'm facing this problem, then you intimately know what that problem is, and then you're going to be in a better position to actually create something to solve it.
So for your guys' business, like what do you guys like remember what you were talking about in terms of what you were going to do for that business, like the ideas you had here? Do you guys remember? No. Is there anything wait, what do we have here? Do you remember, like, what are the ideas you guys had for the business?
We were thinking of selling crafts, jewelry, little things like we had made mood jars before. It's not really the product necessarily, it's the experience and also the opportunity to raise money.
Yeah, well, I think that's great in terms of talking about, like, it in some ways it isn't necessarily about the product, because a lot of what people are looking for nowadays is they want to feel connected and they want to really build relationships. And I think in a world where a lot of things are becoming automated, you guys probably heard of ChatGPT and all those sorts of things. And so when it comes to just knowing how to like follow directions and those sorts of things, that is less scarce today. It's less valuable. And so what is becoming more valuable is more meaning in relationships. And you think about what we spend our time on, like, people are so interested in like the kinds of music that they like and the sorts of like clothing that we buy isn't necessarily just like for practical reasons, but we want to show ourselves, we want to understand the people around us, we want to, understand ourselves. And I think that that's part of what you guys can bring in terms of this opportunity of not just like, in terms of creating those sorts of crafts, understanding yourself and what is it that's unique about you. Because in a world where we have ChatGPT, you want to think about, what makes me unique like compared to everybody else. Because if you're just one person that could do this thing that a lot of other people could do, then that's not necessarily as valuable as if you can think about what is it that I can bring. And that doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm just so much better than other people at this thing. It's more like you're a unique person, and that means something, especially in today's age. If you think about like movie actors, have you guys ever been watching a show and they change the actor for a character and you're like, what? Like, you can't do that, right? Because that actor is irreplaceable. Their face, their voice, the way they play the character, that's irreplaceable.
Going back to Harry Potter, I think Emma Watson was like gonna quit. Like she was like on the brink of quitting, I think, somewhere in like the later movies. Like, can you imagine that? Like, they just swapped her out. It's like, no! What did you do?
Yeah, and I think that's something you want to be, is you want to be irreplaceable, right? Because then it's not just, oh, you lose your job, you can swap somebody else in there. That's not the way to, like, have the most secure future. You want to think about what is it that I can uniquely bring. And that's something that can happen when you're thinking about the sorts of crafts that you might make in terms of displaying what's most meaningful to you and connecting with other people about that, right? It's not just, if people were just looking for crafts, there's plenty of places to get crafts, but to get a craft from you, to get a craft that's meaningful to you, that you can talk about, here's what's meaningful about it to me, that's a sort of connection that is irreplaceable, because you as a human being are different than all all other human beings. And I think that to really understand how to harness that aspect of it, because I think that is becoming more and more valuable in today's world, because it's not just about, you know, serving a function in society, because chances are plenty of other people can serve that function. It's more about, you know, how can I think about what's really unique about what I can bring? And of course, that's a difficult question, and it's something that I think it's really good that you have this opportunity to invest time and energy into that question, because I think that is the most important question in terms of how you want to set up your future, how you want to think about your life.